So over the weekend here in Australia, we had some protests that were going on throughout the major cities of Australia, here in Melbourne, over in Sydney, and also in Brisbane as well. And the protests that were going on were anti-migration protests. And obviously there's a lot of talk about why these protests are going on. There's a lot of backlash against these protests. And me, myself, as an Aussie, especially as I don't really make that much political content. I do here and there. I mostly concentrate on a lot of internet drama, but as it is something that's going on in my country, I kind of wanted to make, a bit of a video on it. I did make a video of when it comes to, the Palestine protests that are going on here in Australia, especially the one that was in Sydney, like a few weeks ago now. So, you know what? I thought that it would be good to talk about this, especially coming from someone who is an Aussie itself. So, like I said, there was a lot of migration protests that were going on over the weekend. And you're probably asking me, Donnie, why is it that people are protesting against migration in Australia, right? And Australia itself, we are known as one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. Like, if you look it up, especially Melbourne itself is one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world. It is. It's a fact. It's true. You can just look it up. I've seen it myself as well. Even if you go out in the streets of Melbourne, you will see there's people of every different types of culture in this city. So why is it that people are against this so much? Well, it's not because that there is a little bit of migration that's going on in Australia, right? Because we've seen a lot of migration throughout the years, especially in the last 100 years. Because myself, I am a family of immigrants, okay? My family came here after World War II, all right? From all different parts of Europe, mostly when it came to like Greece, Poland, and Italy. Those are like the main three of where my family came from, right? Is because after World War II, Europe was in the shitter. Europe was in the shitter. A lot of people wanted to flee Europe to look for better lives. So that is myself of when it came to, my family leaving from Europe. And with that, there was a lot of immigrants that came from Europe during this. In a 20-year span, and all the statistics that I'm pulling up, by the way, everything is from not Bureau of Statistics specifically, but everything is from government websites, okay? So if you see me pulling up any of these statistics that are going to be throughout this video, and you're going to say to me, Donnie, where are you getting these from? Donnie, these are wrong, blah, blah, blah. All of these are pulled from government websites. So if you're calling me wrong, then that's just you're the one who's being a fucking liar about it. But in a 20-year span between 1945 and 1965, there was a total of 2 million immigrants that arrived in Australia after the Second World War. And to be honest, if you really think about it, 2 million over 20 years isn't really that much. It's not. And when my family came over here as well, we assimilated to the culture. We did. We assimilated to the culture. And my family itself, my grandfather, who's Greek, right? He was born in Greece. He moved over here, and at like a very young age, he worked here. Then he helped bring the rest of his family over here as well. He considers himself Australian. He doesn't consider himself Greek. Obviously, he acknowledges where he's from. He might still have a heavy accent. He speaks English fluently. Every one of my family speaks English fluently. We all do. We all speak it fluently. I mean, I can't even speak any other fucking language either. I consider myself an Aussie, right? I know where my ethnicity is from, but I was born in this country, raised in this country. We all assimilated to the culture of when we came over here as well. And as a matter of fact, a lot of us, actually, when they did come over here, a lot of us did get a lot of hate from the Aussies that were here. We were called wogs, which was a derogatory term back in the day, but now it's actually kind of turned into a term of where people like acknowledge it. Like someone calls me a wog, and I'm just like, yeah, that's what I am. I'm mostly South Europe descent, from like Italy to and all the Balkans, and even like places like Malta as well. If you came from like Europe after World War II, you were known as like a wog, right? And then there was also other migration that came during the Vietnam War, because as you know, Australia is on the south side of Asia, in Oceania as it's known, but we're pretty much right on the border of Asia. So over 10 years, we got 94,000 refugees from Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, which is not many at all. We've had migration over the years, right? But the difference between that is that, one, if you look at it, the migration isn't that much. 2 million over 20 years, that's really not that many. That's 100,000 people per year, right? Fuck all. Absolutely fuck all. And then 94,000 people over 10 years, that's even less. But then you look at the migration in this day and age, and these are tables, these are statistics, like I said, that are pulled up from government websites. And you look at this, of the amount of migration arrivals that we have had especially since COVID, right? Because obviously COVID, it took a massive dip because no one was allowed out of their fucking country. It's the only time that we had migrant departures over migrant arrivals. And then, since the country has come out of lockdowns from COVID, we have had a massive spike in migration. At one point, it reached over 700,000, apparently, according to these tables, which is absolutely fucking insane. 700,000 people coming into this country as a migrant. That's ridiculous. 700,000 people in total over 10 years. That's going to be like 7 million new people into this country. You might say, Donnie, okay, I don't care, right? I don't care. As long as these people are conforming to the culture. Well, that's where a lot of people have issues with this, is because a lot of the people who are coming into this country, who are migrating into this country in recent times, they aren't necessarily conforming to the culture. Like I said, when it came to my family coming over here, we conformed to the culture. We learned the language. We learned the predominant language that was English in this country. We learned to blend in with the established Australians that were here, and also the Aboriginals, which I'm going to talk about more because obviously that's a massive talking point in this. But first I'm going to talk about this, is that we assimilated to that. A lot of these cultures aren't. These cultures, instead of coming here, sharing theirs and accumulating to the current established culture, they are wanting to stick to their own. And a matter of fact, they want to bring their own culture and change things the way that they are. And the two cultures that a lot of people have issues with is Indian culture and Muslims, okay? And now this isn't every single one of them, obviously, okay? I have met Indian people, right? I have friends who are Indian, and I have met people who are Muslim, right? And these people that I have met, some of them, they do accumulate to the culture, right? They are Aussie. Right? I've met Indian people who have fucking Aussie accents, who are Australian, who assimilate to the culture, who consider themselves Australian. But you have a lot of them who don't. And one of the great examples of this is that a lot of women that I've ever talked to in my life, whether it's family or friends, every single one of them has a story about how they've gone out on a night out, and they have a story about how an Indian person tried to grope them or SA them. Because in India, right, the fact that they don't have a lot of women in that country, a lot of women over there, they do get SA'd, they get raped a lot. It does happen, okay? It happens. You can't tell me that it doesn't fucking happen in that country. It happens all the time. There's many examples of where you get foreign women who go over to India to travel and then they get raped. And then you have a lot of people from that country, they come here thinking that they can treat the women here the way that they treat their own women over there. And like I said, I have so many stories. There's so many women that I have met that have stories of where Indian men have tried to grope them. I have worked in bars, in nightclubs before, because I used to be a bartender, and you always see there's always a lot of creepy Indian men who you can tell that they haven't assimilated to the culture, that they are fresh off the fucking boat. They come here and they just want to try and like grope all the women. They see that, you know, we have beautiful women here in Australia, whether they were born here or from foreigners, and then they just want to go ahead and think that they can do whatever the fuck they want. And then you have a lot of Muslims as well that have come here. And like I said, is that this is not all of them, but a lot of Muslims, they come here, assimilate to the culture, but then you have a lot of them who don't. As a matter of fact, not only do they not want to assimilate to the culture, but they want to bring in Sharia law. That is right. I saw a video where this guy who is an Australian military, he was a former soldier of the Australian Army, and he watched a video talking about how there is a Muslim person in Sydney, I think it was, who wants to implement Sharia law into Australia, and he also talks about his personal experience with Sharia law as well.
We forget that there is a Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waiting to be established. We forget that every single day that we live without the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are being dishonored.
Bankstown, Sydney. An Australian cleric stood in a mosque and said he feels belittled living without Sharia law. Now, let me tell you something. I've witnessed this law work firsthand from my time in Afghanistan. Now, under Sharia law, women can't drive or travel alone without a male guardian, in many interpretations. A woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's in court. Child marriage, well, that's often legal, sometimes as young as 9 years old. If you want to leave the faith, well, that's punishable by death in countries under Sharia law. And homosexuality, well, that's illegal, punishable by prison, lashes, or worse. And yet this bloke says he feels belittled here in Australia. Mate, you live in one of the freest countries on earth. We believe in freedom of religion and freedom from religious rule. Women can vote, drive, work, speak, and lead, and choose their own path. And if that bothers you, I've got a suggestion for you. Move to a country where Sharia law is the law of the land, because here, we don't want it. Now, don't get me twisted, not all Muslims are like this. Some came to Australia to escape regimes and laws like this, and rulers like the one he's praising. But when the extremists bring that ideology here, that's when we've got to speak up. And let's be honest, not many people do. Well, especially not many people who have a face to their Instagram. I will, and there's another bloke called Big Chocky. He calls it out as well. And yeah, the threats come in. It's sometimes risky to call this out, but I'm not going to stand by while someone else trashes our values. Freedom, equality, and safety for every Australian. And this isn't about hate. It's about protecting what's right in this country. And this is why I speak up. Because Australia is worth fighting for, even if our current government isn't fighting for us. What's your thoughts?
And I actually saw this too. So not only that video, but I saw that Sharia law, this is from a government website, by the way, a fucking government website talking about how Sharia law is already operating in Australia. We should not be allowing this. Sharia law is disgusting. If you want to practice your religion, fair. I'm allowed to practice mine. If you want to go to a mosque, right, and you want to pray, that's fine. All right, that's absolutely fine. But Sharia law, that's a different fucking story. All right, because it oppresses people in multiple different ways. There's so many different ways that Sharia law is implemented, but from head to toe, it is a disgusting law, and it should not be allowed to operate anywhere here in Australia because it is oppressive. And then another reason why a lot of people have problems with mass migration as well is the fact that we have a lot of issues already that are going on in Australia. We have a massive homeless problem. Okay, Australia has a homeless issue. If you go out, if you live in Melbourne, right? If you live in Melbourne and you've gone out on a weekend and you walk through the streets of Melbourne, there are homeless people everywhere. You see them. When I used to go out clubbing a lot, like years ago, and it's only gotten worse. I don't go clubbing anymore, but whenever I've gone out to like dinner, say, or when my ex-girlfriend used to live in the city, so I used to go to the city every single weekend, and whenever I'd walk through the streets, there's just homeless people sleeping fucking everywhere. They would sleep, like, as soon as stores would close, they'd sleep out the front of the stores on the little, like, out front of the fucking door. They'd set up their little camp out there with, like, 5 different fucking blankets going on. It's just like, it's obviously that we have a massive issue. We have unemployment rate that is going up every single year. Not only that, the economy in Australia is shit. It's terrible. Everything is so fucking expensive in this country. And it's just like, how is it that we have so many other issues, okay? We have homeless problems. We have unemployment issues. Things cost a fucking fortune in this country. And instead of fixing those issues, instead of putting money and time into those issues, we are bringing mass migration up to, like, 500,000 people on average every single year into this country. It's just like, people in this country already can't afford it. You have issues with the people who were born in this country, and then you want to bring more people in, and those people who are brought in as well, they themselves, they are cheap labor. Okay, I know this for a fact, is that the people who are brought here as immigrants, especially in this day and age, they are cheap labor. They are not given like these high profile jobs. They are not high profile immigrants. They are just bottom of the barrel people who work low paying jobs that Aussies could be working, right? And not only that, is that these people aren't even being paid minimum wage. Sometimes they're paid fucking below minimum wage, and they don't want to speak out because they're immigrants, because they don't want to risk their visas being like torched in any way possible, because they know that the company that they're working for, with them being, established Australians and established citizens, that they can't speak up against, their bosses a lot of the times, because they're scared of getting sent back to where the fuck they came from. That's what happens. It happens in this country of where a lot of these, smaller companies, they will hire immigrants as cheap labor. The people who are against these, anti-migration protests, right? They don't make sense to me, okay? Because one of the arguments for it is the fact that if you are not an Aboriginal person, who the Aborigines, they were the original owners of the land of here in Australia, okay? When the British came over to Australia, right? When the British first came over and they were like, oh, there's land over here. The Aboriginals were here. And then it's very unfortunate of what happened. We all acknowledge it, that it's very unfortunate of the fact that Australia was then colonized and a whole lot of Aboriginal people for many years, they were taken away from their homes. A lot of them were killed. It's shit that happened. And people say that unless you're Aboriginal, you can't speak up against this, right? And then they're also saying that let people in the country. Why is it that you can acknowledge, and even I can acknowledge, that what happened of where these people came over from Britain, changed the culture the way it is, changed the way of life. We know that that was bad, but it's something that we can't change now. It's something that has happened, all right? You can't expect all the people who were born here to go back to Europe. You can't expect me to go back to Europe. You can't expect people who are, descendants of these British colonizers to go back to Europe. You can't expect that of them. So you know that it's bad. So why is it that you then think that then changing the culture once again and mass migrating people is good? That just doesn't make sense. I just think that you're talking up against these people for the fact that, they might not have, other political views that you agree with. That just doesn't make sense to me. I saw people burning the Australian flag. Apparently one of them was someone who was wearing an Aborigine t-shirt. And it's just how is it that you acknowledge that what happened to your ancestors or what happened to the original owners of this land was bad, and then you're fine with the whole entire culture trying to change again? You're fine with people migrating into this country and trying to change the culture once again. It's just no, we know what happened was bad. It's something that we can't change, so don't let it happen again. Why is it that you're then fine with it happening? And then I saw as well of that there was supposedly it clashed with a pro-Palestine movement. I made a whole video about this. Australia has nothing to do with that war. We have nothing to do with it. We are actually sending $300 million to Palestine. We have sent, since October 7th, we have sent $300 million to Palestine. We have nothing to do with the war. We are legitimately helping the Palestinian people. Australia has never acknowledged Israel as a good force. We have condemned Israel. We have acknowledged Palestinians as their own state. Why are we still having Palestinian protests? You want to know why we are having Palestinian protests? It's very fucking obvious. To take away from the actual issues that are going on in this country. Palestine is not an issue in this country. It's not. We should stop these Palestine protests. They're not Australian. It's not an Aussie issue. Talk about actual Australian issues. The homelessness that's going on. The fact that we have unemployment rate is going on. How terrible the economy is. People can't afford fucking houses. The people that are being brought into this country are being used by companies as cheap labor. The mass migrants that are coming into this country are not assimilating to the current culture and trying to change it into their own way of life. And we acknowledge that changing the culture has happened before and it is bad. So why is it that you are thinking that it's a good thing to change it once again? So this is why that all this is going on. And I will say this as well, is that I acknowledge that the protests, they got out of control. They 100% did. They got into fights, and there was also a lot of neo-Nazis that were at these protests. And those people, they're fucking pieces of shit, all right? Because they will turn these and make these protests look like just actual racism, all right? I know a lot of people are throwing around the words of saying that everyone who, was for these anti-immigration protests. I know people will call me fucking racist as well, but the neo-Nazis, they're just a whole nother level. They don't like me either. They hate wogs too, all right? They want full British people in this country. They want descendants of British colonizers in this country. They even fucking hate wogs, okay? And they're the bad actors, all right? You need to acknowledge that. And even if you are for like, you know, these mass migration protests, if you see any of these fucking neo-Nazis and with their flag, because there's like a Australia neo-Nazi flag, and I barely saw any of them out of this protest. It's still small. I hate the fact that a lot of people are making it out that, like, you know, this whole entire protest was run by them and that all of these people were neo-Nazis. No, it's still the 1% of the people in these protests, but they still need to be called out, and that they're not on the same level of these, because they're just like, yes, we are against mass migration and people wanting to change the culture, and we should be focusing on the issues that we already have in Australia, focus on the homelessness and all the unemployment rate. These neo-Nazis, fuck them, all right? They're fucking pieces of shit. They're taking it to like the whole next level where they would even want to fucking deport me, who's someone who has accumulated to this culture and was even born here in Australia. But yeah, I would definitely like to hear what you guys think about all this down below. Whether you're an Australian or a foreigner, I would like to hear your opinions. You are 100%, even if you aren't from this country. Voice your opinions down below. That's going to be it from me. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Peace out.